Again, I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. As far as I'm concerned, every teacher who's here tonight is a hero. And that's because in one of the toughest years ever to teach AP biology, and AP biology is always a tough course to teach, you haven't given up. You've hung in there. And I'll tell you how I know that. I know that because it's a Thursday night and you have chosen on your own time to come in here and to learn more about how you can support your students and help them succeed. So thank you. My name is Glen Wilkenfeld. I'm an AP biology teacher. I teach in Berkeley High School in Berkeley, California. And you might know of me because of my Science Music Videos YouTube channel. I have some AP biology songs like glycolysis. My main project now is a website called learn-biology.com, an online AP bio curriculum, which about 200 teachers, many of whom are here tonight, serving about 10,000 students, have been using this year to provide content and learning to their students. I'm also the creator of an app that's called Biomania. After our panel, if you're interested in learning more about learn-biology.com or Biomania, I'll hang out and you can ask some questions. This meeting that you've attended tonight is the last in a series of meetings that have been going on for this entire year. And it's been with teachers who are using Science Music Videos, learn-biology.com, with their students. And tonight we're going to have a panel discussion about how you can get your students to excel and shine when they respond to the FRQs on this year's exam. I'm incredibly grateful to all of our panelists that we have here tonight and the wisdom that they're going to share. So every single one of them is a veteran, experienced AP biology teacher, and I'll just run through a couple of extraordinary things about each of them. We have Jason Cox, who teaches at Charlestown High School in Indiana. Jason was Indiana's 2019 Outstanding Biology Teacher of the Year. Allison Kittay is an educational consultant who taught AP Bio for 16 years at Cerrito High School, right in my neighborhood, and 16 years at Redwood High School across the Bay in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's been a reader for over 20 years, and she's been a College Board consultant since 2002. Kelly Derrick teaches at Wausau West High School in Wisconsin. She has scored AP Bio exams since 2006. And she's been a table leader, which is a higher level of reader for the past 3 years. She was the 2012 Outstanding Biology Teacher of the Year for the state of Wisconsin. We have Tom Freeman, who teaches at Esperanza High School in Anaheim, California. He's been an AP reader since 2010. He's the NABT Regional Director for the West Coast and a member of the NABT's Professional Development Organization. And we have Corey Mullen. She's an AP Bio teacher and Science Department Chairperson at Turpin High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Corey has also been a reader since 2010, and now she's moved up the hierarchy to table leader and now question leader. So we have an enormous amount of experience. So the structure for tonight is as follows. Each panelist is going to talk for a little bit about ways that you can coach your students on maximizing their performance on this year's AP Bio exams. You'll find little nuggets, little bits of wisdom, and I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. They're each going to present for about 3 or 4 minutes. After all the panelists present, we'll ask you to offer comments and questions in the chat. I'll relay those questions either to individual teachers or to the whole panel, and people will take them from there. So again, thank you so much. Remember to keep yourself muted so that we can hear the panelists, and let's go ahead and start. So we are gonna turn it over to our first panelist, Jason Cox. Jason, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Glenn. All right, guys, it's great to see you. And I think we're all in the crunch now of trying to put together our end game for trying to maximize our students' scores. We know what they know, and we want them to be able to really relay what they know. And looking at just common mistakes that I see on AP exams and errors that I work with my students, a few things that I want to point out early, and I think that we will all have little nuggets that will be useful. And one little piece that I think is so overlooked, and that is during the actual read for the essay, the FRQ, you have 90 minutes for the FRQ, and it's built to have a 10-minute period for them to read. So of that 90, 10 of it is kind of anticipated that they will be reading what the prompt is saying, what it's asking. So many times I get to grading these responses, and I'm reading what they're talking about. And it looks like they really know content, but they're not answering the question whatsoever. And so, and looking at the question, I think they just need to stop, think about what's being asked, read it twice, read it 3 times if they need to. Another thing that I have my students do is box the command terms and circle the qualifiers, because a lot of times when they get through and they're answering a question, they think that they've really done something special and they've really nailed it, but it was a swing and a miss. They didn't do what was asked. Whether, it's asking them to justify something and they explain it instead, or whether it's to provide evidence and they don't provide the evidence, they just list. Another thing that is, I don't want to say a pet peeve, but I guess it falls closer to that. And that is, students oftentimes when they're writing FRQs, some English teacher somewhere has told them to restate the question. And restating the question, the questions are oftentimes wordy and have some heavy jargon of AP biology, and they're talking about nematodes or some kind of bacteria they've never heard of before. And that's not necessarily the question, but it's really deep in the jargon, and they get done with rewriting the stem and they think they've said something. And they're pretty satisfied with their response. They think that they've nailed it, and they've just reworded the stem, the question. And so many times I'm reading something, and when I get done, I was like, what did they say? And I stopped and I reread their section, like, what are they trying to do here? And I look for the command terms, like, did they justify? And I'm looking like, no. And then I go back to the stem and I see that it's basically the stem. They have used a lot of heavy vocab and AP biology that was fed to them in the stem, and they walk away thinking that they've really answered it. And I've talked to students, and I know some students that are mine that are just repeat offenders in this, that I'm like, don't repeat the stem, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And they said, is it wrong? Well, no, but you will think that you've actually said something. So just get away from that if you can. So I know we were going for 2 or 3 minutes, so I'll pass the baton, but lots more to say. And take it from here, Glenn.
Reading the prompt, what could be more important than that, and making sure that you're responding to the prompt? Jason, thanks very much. I'm going to turn it over to Allison. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for joining us, and best of luck to your students on this year's exam. Jason and I did not compare notes, but my tip for improving your students' responses on the FRQs is stands for answer the prompt. So how do we do that? How do we teach our students to answer the prompt? Jason gave you a few ideas, and I'm going to just repeat some of them and expand on what he was talking about. So I like to teach my students something that's called the close reading strategy. It is a strategy that can be used to decipher any piece of text, but it works especially well when looking at these free response questions. And so the students should put a box around those words that instruct. And these are our task verbs. And the task verbs are going to be bold-faced words. And I'll give you an example of a couple of them in just a moment. And that can kind of, give the students the direction to go in or how to approach their response. Next, students should circle words that tell them how many. For example, if a question asks for 2 examples of something, they should only give 2 examples. If they spend time listing, 6 examples, only read the first 2. And so they should try to give their best 2 examples to get scored. If a student thinks of a better example after they've already given their 2, they can cross off one, and as readers will know to read the 2 that remain. And in this way, if they only focus on those 2, they won't waste time going off on a whole list of other ones. And then finally, students should underline any content words. And the content, often when students are reading that stem or background of the question, it provides them with the biological content that they need in order to be able to write an excellent response. It also may kind of jog their memory about some particular content that students can then use in their own response. And so what I wanted to do is give a couple of examples from the CED of task verbs. And these are the words that students would box as they're using that close reading strategy. And one of them is to state the null/alternative hypothesis. And that's how it's written in the CED. And those are two different things. The null hypothesis is one type of hypothesis, and an alternative hypothesis is an alternative experimental hypothesis. And students really should know the difference between those two things. Straight from the CED, what they're saying, the state the null alternative hypothesis means is to indicate or provide a hypothesis to support or defend a claim about a scientifically testable question. So let me give you an example of each of those. Many of us do labs that investigate the effect of the environment on meiosis and onion root tips. And so we use a growth accelerator called lectin. And so a null hypothesis might be stated as there is no difference in the number of cells in mitosis in the lectin treatment compared to the control, okay? An alternative hypothesis might be the lectin treatment has fewer number of cells in mitosis compared to the control, or it has greater number of cells in mitosis compared to the control. So those are two different things that are kind of under that same command term or task verb. And I'm gonna stop here so the next panelists can speak, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about what I've discussed.
Thank you so much, Allison. And the way, again, that this is going to work is I want people to sort of think about their questions. We're going to have all the panelists present, and then we'll open it up to questions. And think about if your question is going to go to one of the panelists or if it's to the entire panel. So with that having been said, Kelly, can you please go ahead and tell us your wisdom about how to get kids ready for the FRQs?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Glenn. One of the things I think I would like to share with everybody is if you have the opportunity right now to be in review mode for the exam, one of the things that I like to do after I give my students a free response question, I tell them to reread what they have written and to underline the college level vocabulary or the college level concepts. Because what we see at the read is students will give a very good high school level answer, but what they're attempting to do is earn college credit. So they have to be able to separate their answer from a high school student to a college level student. And a lot of times students will use words that they think are perfectly acceptable. And it turns out that they're not going to get an AP point by doing that. For example, a student might write in a free response question something like, the results will be altered because the organism's environment has changed. The word altered is not going to get them a college level point. What the question is looking for is directionality in their response. So yes, the environment has been altered, but would that cause there to be, for example, an increase in the rate of something, the decrease in the rate of something, or even though the environment has changed, would that not even have a significant change in the outcome? So there, the question is most likely looking for directionality, and students will use words that they think are acceptable, but they'll write things like it would cause the experiment to be messed up. If they don't elaborate on what messed up means, that's certainly not college level information. Or so I've even remember reading one time a student wrote something along the lines like, the organism will suffer. What exactly does that mean? They have to be more specific than that. But one of the biggest ones I think students have an issue with is they will just drop the term mutation and think that a change and using mutation as the answer is a college level answer. And in reality, it's not, because high school students in regular biology, they know the word mutation. They've been taught that. So for a college level point, they need to elevate their answer and they need to describe the type of mutation. Is it a point mutation? Is it a missense mutation? Is it a nonsense mutation? And remember, not all mutations even produce a change, because there are silent mutations. So the students really need to be more specific. Okay, so I think that's my time for now, and I have other examples, but I'll let the next panelist speak.
Kelly, thank you very, very, very much. Really important ideas about having students elevate the quality of their responses, which goes in line with what everybody has been saying so far. Tom, you're next. Let's hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming in this evening. I had a list of things and I was kind of checking them off as Allison and Jason and Kelly spoke. In line with what they said, kids do not need a topic sentence like their language arts teacher may recommend. And also in line with some of what Kelly said, what students actually see in a diagram. All right, if they just describe what they're viewing in a diagram, such as like glucose entering a cell, you know, they might be asking about, okay, what process is being used, but if it just says glucose goes in the cell and you can obviously see that by looking at a picture, they're probably not going to get any points for that. Also, some of the other things I'd like to throw in there, I've been told by Mark Little, who is also an AP consultant like Allison Kittay is, and he said, you know, science practice 1 and science practice 6 are probably the most important ones. And the command term describe is in science practice 1, like describe biological concepts or processes, explain biological processes, for example, describe the effect of a mutation. And so like Kelly kind of just talked about that briefly. If those of you who use the Bio in Focus book and you look at the very beginning and you look at the question, there's a diagram in there. I think it's excellent. It has the EKs, the essential knowledge statements on one side. It has the science practice, and then it has an arrow that goes down. And that's how the learning objectives were derived. And I imagine some of you taught remotely, or you're still teaching remotely, as I did for a lot of the year, and you might be behind. So I started like really going in and seeing, okay, I'm on ecology now. I'll be honest, it's not my favorite unit. Okay, what do they really need to know? Do my students need to know anything about aquatic biomes? Probably not. And I was trying to like cut to the chase. And other things that I've been trying to review, my command terms, we divided them up yesterday. The equation and the formula sheet. So yeah, I covered error bars, but it was months ago. And I know if I threw a question at my students now, chances are they're probably going to miss parts of it because that was months ago and they didn't go back and review. So if it's on the equation sheet, I would tell you there's a good chance it could make the test. And those who've been teaching this a couple of years, I would look at the equation sheet because it has changed. They no longer have to calculate free energy, for example, but they should understand the concept. So some of those things I just would like to make sure you understand pretty well. I went through in the summer and I sat and I put, you know, when my binder came and it's here in my living room, and I put sticky notes in all the sections. Okay, do they really need to know the myelin sheath anymore? No, but neurotransmitters, for example, are an illustrative example. So if you've been around, it's gone from where they had to know everything down to like a shorter part. And For additional review, I'm hoping that all of you are aware there is a YouTube channel, and there's been a YouTube video every night. I think tonight is the last one on ecology. But that's probably about my 3 minutes.
Tom, thanks very much. Going over the formula sheet, super important. And really, you know, it's about having students practice more than anything. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'm going to turn it over to our last panelist. Corey, it's all yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I know this is a really crazy busy time for everybody. I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle than my colleagues did. They did such an amazing job of kind of getting to the content part of it. At this time of year, I've turned into a cheerleader for my students, and it's us against College Board in the exam. And so it's how can I beat this exam? And it's things that you think by the time you're a junior and senior in high school, you should know, and they just don't. So it's things like, I think it was Jason who talked about, make sure you read all the questions. Take the 10 minutes and just read them. Then I told them to go a step further. Game plan. Where are you going to start? Ooh, that question number 5 is an easy one. I'm going to answer that one first. Now I got 5 points in my back pocket, and question number 1, which was scary a second ago, not so scary anymore. So those are some of the things that I really encourage them to do, because as readers, what we see all too often is question number 1 will have 6 pages of, okay, 6 pages, a lot of writing on it, and the last 2 questions will be completely empty. Well, this was clearly a student who ran out of time and tried to answer them in order. But maybe one of those last 2 questions they would have been able to earn a lot of points on. So that's one of the big things I work on with my students. Another thing I model for them a lot. Well, yeah, Sora just said something that's on the paper exam. That's correct. And so that is tricky for those of you who have digital exams. I'm lucky enough to be in paper this year. But another thing I model for them a lot is actually reading questions. And as we say in a very professional way, reading through the crap. You know, somebody mentioned the fact that there's lots of scientific names on there, right? There's lots of big, heavy names of drugs and proteins and that are 12 feet long. Do you really need to know what those are? No, you need to know it's a protein. Okay, now I know something about it. And so teaching them to kind of read through the layers of the question and practice that as you, especially at this time of year, give them a question that just looks like a nightmare. And then it's really just a natural selection question, but they have trouble getting there until you show them that. And then I think the third thing that I really hit hard with my kids, especially at this time of year, is use what you are given. In particular, use the graphics. In fact, I tell them to take an extra minute, slow down, and read that chart, read that graph, read that diagram. What is this thing telling you? Before maybe even you really read the question, so you kind of know what information you're working with, so that once you get into the question, you know what you have. What do you have on your side? And so the direction, again, that I take often with my students is just, you have all these tools, use them to your advantage. So, you know, everything my colleagues say, absolutely correct in getting to those answers. But, you know, teach your kids that they're smart, just like you've been doing all this year. Well, teach them they're smart test takers now. And that's the thing we sometimes forget to tell them.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Corey. And thanks to everybody. You know, as Corey was speaking, I was thinking about how among the teachers who were among the panelists, and also teachers who are here in the room, a ton of you are coaches. And coaching is about eliciting perfect performance. And the way that you do that is by engaging your students in practice that's as close as possible to the real thing. So getting your students to write their responses to past FRQs as much as possible over the next couple of weeks, depending on when you're taking the exam, that's probably the greatest thing that you can do. And then also training your students how to use the scoring guide so they can give themselves feedback. Because what you want to make sure to do is not have yourself be the bottleneck in terms of rich feedback coming to students as much as possible. Ultimately, you need to teach them how to regulate their own learning. And now's the time to really move forward to practice. I love what Corey said about it's us against the College Board right now. You know, we are now trying to get our kids to perform at a level where they'll get a 4 or a 5. So what I'd like to do now is this. I'd like people to feel free to submit questions that have been coming through. I've seen some that have been in the chat, and you can direct those questions to any one individual. You can direct them to particular individuals. You can direct them to me. And I'm seeing a question that's coming in from an old buddy of mine, Dan Powers. And so,
Glenn, I can share with you that there was a question early on during Jason's talk. It was around 5:13, and the question was simple. What did you mean by qualifier?
okay, qualifier. Who wants to take that on? Who was the person who said it?
I think we all said a little bit of it. And so many times in the question, there will be describe and list to. And so a lot of times when students are answering, they do part of a question, but they don't do the entire thing. And so whenever they're going through, make sure that they are doing the two that they need to do, not six, as Kelly kind of reiterated, and I think Allison did as well. Whenever they're really, when you dissect a question, it's more than just usually a blurb kind of answer. It's breaking it down. And something that I've had my students do is they've been instructed to write justify. And so whenever they're justifying a point or whether they're explaining, like for explaining, I want them to explain how to analyze the relationship or explain why, with motivation and reasoning for the relationship. I want them really to, I mean, they've really spelled it out for the reader, not that it's all about us, but it's ultimately about them, for them to know that they have answered that question. The most annoying kind of responses that I see are just where somebody writes a full page and nothing is separated and nothing is really identified of what they're trying to answer. And I'm racking my brain trying to find where they're answering these pieces. If they write down that, you know, they wrote the word literally explain and then wrote their explanation, it helps me, but it's not about helping me. It's each student knowing that they have answered that explain piece and then go back and reread what they had written. Sometimes students get hung up on grammar. Grammar doesn't matter. The only really thing that could go under the grammatical helm is write complete sentences. As a rule of thumb, if you're writing a complete sentence, you'll be better off than the few exceptions where you can put a short blurb or something like that, or just a statement where just a word or two words. I see some of those as potential. I'll join in on somebody else's, I'm sure, with some of my pet peeves, but Kelly.
One of the things I would like to add too is we see a lot of times when we're scoring exams, if there's a question about cellular respiration, students will write absolutely everything they know about cellular respiration and just do this mental mind dump of everything they know. And what they know is quite extensive, but that's not what the question is asking for. So some people will say, well, that's not bad to write more than you need for the answer, is it? And on the one hand, no, they're not going to get penalized for it. But on the other hand, if they're writing so much on cellular respiration and they don't, that's not what, they're not even asked to explain all of cellular respiration. When they write too much in their answer, what's going to happen is exactly what Corey talked about, and they're going to run out of time to answer other questions that they know the answers to. That becomes the danger of writing too much and not actually trying to pick apart the question and say, what are they really asking me to do?
Just to champion that, I call that flexing, when a student really flexes how much they know. And the problem is they think they know more than they know. And sometimes they negate themselves. They say something in their flexing that actually cancels out their point. So if they wrote the textbook on cellular respiration and they are accurate, no penalty for doing that. it's great. I hope you finish all your questions, like, as you know, reiterating Corey's point, that's going to be the problem, is you're not going to have time. They can even pace themselves on how long it takes them to write. But as they flex, we are reading every single word on every single page. Every word is thought through. We are reading, and we can't extrapolate from that. It's word for word. But if they say something that is incorrect, that takes away from that point. A lot of times they like to say it not once, but they like to just make sure that they've said it and say the same thing a different way. We've all been in those kind of relationships before, where they're saying things in different ways, and it's quite exhausting. And just to add on to that a little bit with the talk, and that is passive speak. When I have students say the words maybe, I think, probably, most likely, in my classroom, if they write any of those words on theirs, they don't get the point. And that's in my classroom, because I've read thousands of essays that you get to most likely, and it's like, you don't know it. You don't know it. You are making, and I think it just comes from them. They're not completely secure because they're talking about some jargon that's quite complicated. I get it, but you're answering it. So answering it. So answer it. Don't just go with most likely, or at the very end, probably. I've seen it so many times.
Jason, can I piggyback on you for just a second? Because I think what you just said was really, really important. But I think there are a couple of things that are kind of misunderstandings in terms of what our jobs are when we are readers. And so here's my totally unpaid advertisement: sign up to read. Sign up to read today. Sign up to read go. I get it. The idea of sitting on your butt for 7 straight days, 8 straight hours a day reading is like overwhelming and crazy because you just did it all. Go, go, go. But here's the things that you need to know. First of all, there are 600 people who sit in this room, and all they try to do for all those hours is get your kids' points. I have watched readers literally walk around the room with a tough handwriting and find 6 or 7 different people. What's this word? Because it's the word, right? Okay. So we're trying to get the points for them. So what can you do to help your reader? Well, one of the questions that came up in the chat was, should we have them separate by section? Absolutely. Make an A, answer part A. Make a B, answer part B. If you're going to answer out of order, that's fine. Still label it A. Maybe you leave me a line in between. Now, another thing that we're told regularly is, if you find a point for A written in part B, that's okay. They still get the point. We have to read every word that's put down. Now, in the good old days, for those of you who've been teaching a while, we had those 4 crazy long questions, and kids wouldn't even know where to start, and you'd hear about prom night the whole question. I had one year that was 2.5 pages long, and the last question, or the last thing they wrote, was the cell was prokaryotic. That was a point. And so we literally read every word that's there. And so tell your kids that. So then that goes back to what Jason and Kelly were saying. Answer the question that's asked. And somebody in here said something about a very general question. What if you have a really, really general question like describe mitosis? In my experience, College Board has done an excellent job of removing most of those questions, at least in the recent years, the recent tests I've seen, that there are very few anymore that are that big, because you're right, then what do you do? And so the number of times kids will be asked to just say, what do you know about this massive topic, has gotten very small. And then the only thing I was thinking when I throw out, and I'll shut up so someone else can talk, kids get stuck on words, get stuck on language, right? And we're looking at an osmosis question. I know it's either hypertonic or hypotonic, but which one is it? 99% of the time, it doesn't matter. 99% of the time, they don't need that word to get the point. If they're telling me that the molecules are moving with the concentration gradient or against the concentration gradient, in other words, they're describing hypertonic and hypotonic, it doesn't matter. And so I always tell my kids, if you aren't sure of the vocabulary, make me as your reader sure that you understand the concept, and you're usually going to get the point.
Hey guys, I want to jump in. I know that I'm in this position, and probably a lot of other folks are. I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to be helpful in terms of this, but this question is coming up a lot in the chat. A lot of folks are having their students taking digital administrations of the exam. I am telling my students that, yeah, there are going to be constraints. You might be locked in terms of the order of the questions that you're going to be confronting. We still have to prepare in the same way. You need to be able to analyze data. You need to be able to carefully read the prompt. You need to be able to make sure that you answer all parts of the question. I'm wondering, though, if anybody has any other advice for folks who are having their students take digital administrations that they might be able to share, since it seems like there's a lot of concern about that among teachers. I'll just open that up to anyone who wants to jump in.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. There is quite a lengthy explanation of what to expect from the digital exams on the College Board website, which I just put that link in the chat. There are two big differences in terms of the digital versus pen and paper. The first one is that on the digital exam, the second FRQ will not ask students to construct a graph. They will have to interpret data perhaps in a graph form, but they will not be asked to construct a graph on the digital exam. The second thing is that students will not be able to go backwards. They can only move forward. So the advice that Corey gave in the pen and paper exam is awesome. You read the questions, you know number 4 best, start with number 4. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible in the digital exam. So students will have to go through in number order. My best advice for practicing that is give students practice taking the exam digitally. And if you go into AP Classroom, you can take some exams there. Also, if you have your audit approval, behind that audit approved website, there are 3 practice exams that you can use with your students, and you can administer them in a digital format. So I think that's what I have to say about that.
And one thing that I want to add to what Allison just said is that, you know, the format was ever so slightly shifted with the 2020 exams. So you can expect all of the questions to have, I believe, 4 subparts. And just to get kids in the rhythm of responding to that structure of questions is really important. So if you've passed your audit and you have access to those 2020 exams, you absolutely should have your kids answer every single one of those, just to get them the kind of practice that will simulate the actual event most closely.
Hey, Glenn, can I provide just a couple more tips off the top of my head?
Please, Kelly, thank you.
Sean has his hand up, so go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so one of the things I have, so I don't know if everybody has the same kind of, because I'm at LUSD, it's a pretty big district, so they have like big meetings with the coordinators. So my coordinator, I don't know why other AP teachers haven't talked to her, but she has a lot of information that the College Board gives her that they don't give us for some reason. And so she's talked to me a lot about different things. And there's a lot of like supposing things, but I know that they need to be on AP class, like getting on an AP Classroom, having them do the digital stuff. So I have told my kids, you're not gonna be able to go back and forth. So if you're practicing, when you do our tests, if you go back and forth, which I don't know if there's not really a way to limit that, but I tell them, don't go back and forth. Go through the exam, 1 question at a time. You can't go back and forth. If you don't practice that, you're not practicing to get ready. And so they know that. Same thing when you give them the progress checks. If they haven't done all the progress checks and you're not going to use it for review, you're wasting these resources, because those are all 4-part FRQs, every single one of them. And there's an order. So you got to say, okay, do the first one, even though it tells you to do a graph. I don't even have my kids do the graph anymore. I have them write out what the graph is going to look like, because they need to be able to interpret it and describe it. And so I'm saying, okay, write it on your paper on the side, because you're not going to upload it anymore for digital exam. And you just be able to describe the graph, talk about the graph in a way that's meaningful and specific. So you can train your kids to do these things, but you have to look at the stuff on the website. You have to read all that. They have PowerPoints. They have all sorts of stuff about the digital app. You got to read the directions about all the different things. I walked my kids through that whole PowerPoint about what it's going to look like. all my kids have downloaded it. You can actually see who's downloaded and who hasn't. And we're going to be doing practice on that digital exam next week. So there's multiple versions. You can reset it and have them do it again.
I have a question. How you doing, Glenn? Aaron Schlissel in New York. So I'm a little confused about two things going on because it's a digital platform. The students have downloaded the AP app that they need to upload or download the exam. But then there was also in the past when you wanted to have them take some of the AP website digital material, then there was the lockdown browser that they would use. So if I want them to practice digitally, they're going to be using the AP lockdown browser, or will it be showing up when I assign it into their AP app? Does anyone know that answer to that?
You can only assign things in the browser. The app is limited to only what they give you. So it's either the practice exam or the actual exam when it's time.
Glenn, if I can jump in for a little bit while maybe some other people think of a question or two. Other things that I wrote down in notes tonight to be a little bit prepared. When students are writing their free response questions, they will use words that they think means the exact same thing, but in reality, they don't. Like, for example, they will use the terms natural selection and evolution to mean the exact same thing. So it's really important that we, especially now, even though Unit 7 was pretty recent, but for them to understand that natural selection is the process and evolution is the result is really important for that. And that the natural selection process is working on phenotypes in a population. Like, I've been on questions in the past where students will write their answer and the organism was able to adapt because it's colder there, or they will they'll refer to a mutation, but cold is not a phenotype. A mutation is not a phenotype. So they need to make sure that they're, if they're talking about natural selection, that natural selection works upon phenotypes. One other example that I wrote down is that I have read many responses on students' answers, and a lot of times, due to the pressure of the test and the crunch time of the test, the students will go like all Hollywood in their answer. Like, they'll go very extreme. Like, for example, if there was a volcano that had erupted and then the students were supposed to write about, what would be the possible outcome of that. A lot of students will be like, because the volcano erupted, nothing can live there. So they go very extreme in their answer. And we need to remind students of, usually in biology, it's not always or never, but it's somewhere in between. So they need to be a little bit more flexible in their answers instead of going so extreme. So even if they don't write like all the animals would die, it's like, no, they actually wouldn't. But if they write many animals might die, it gives them that wiggle room to say, well, that's true. Many animals might die. So I always tell my kids, don't go all Hollywood with your answer. It's not gloom and doom because there was a disruption in something.
Hey, just to segue off what Kelly just said, there's a question from Tammy Kirk, who's a science music videos teacher that I've been working with. And I actually just pasted it into the bottom of the chat, so it's going to be easy for everyone to take. Corey, I think you indicated before that you were interested, and it's about how, when we're training our students to do self-scoring, how literally we ask them to look at those scoring guides. And looking at the time, this might be our last question, but it's a very, very important one. Corey, do you want to start us out on this one?
Yeah, I'll talk fast. So the College Board rubrics are written so that you should be able to take one of those rubrics and give your students an accurate score on a written response. Are they meant to be taken literally, like that is literally the only answer? Most of the time, no. Sometimes yes, but most of the time, no. So in fact, some of them will even say other acceptable answers. So when you are looking at the rubrics, again, it's very rarely about the term. It's very rarely about the specific item, and it's more conceptual. And so if a student loses a term but describes it for you accurately, you can give them that point, even though the rubric says, like the rubric says hypertonic, and they didn't use the word hypertonic, but they accurately described a hypertonic solution, they'll still earn the point. And I see Allie waving in, so I'm gonna let her jump in.
I just wanted to say, I think that's absolutely right. I did answer that in the chat, and you gave an illustration. Students may get hung up on a particular term, but as long as they describe what's going on and they demonstrate understanding, that point would be awarded. I do want to say that those rubrics are constructed and vetted, and a lot of time and energy and a lot of eyes go on to the construction or into the construction of those rubrics. And so they should really be adhered to as closely as possible. But again, you are a professional and you can use your judgment as to whether or not you think the student meets the bar of those rubric guidelines.
All right, folks, it's 5:55, and my sense from the intensity of questions is that we could probably do this for many more hours, but we're going to start to bring this to a close. So I want to start, first of all, by thanking everyone who's here for coming tonight. And I'll tell you about a couple of things that I'm going to do. I'm going to post summary notes on the AP Bio Facebook page, or link to summary notes. And I'll make a video based on what we all talked about tonight. And I'll have that ready for you to rewatch with your students if you want. And I'll have that within a day or two. It'll be on YouTube. I'll email you links. I'll probably post it on our Facebook AP Bio teachers page. I want also just to take this minute to thank Jason, Allison, Kelly, Tom, and Corey for sharing their wisdom tonight. And I want everybody just to give them some Zoom applause and Zoom love for coming here and sharing everything that they have. So thanks all of you very, very much. Thank you. I also want to thank all the teachers who have been meeting with me in this forum. It's been a much smaller forum for the entire school year. And I just want to say that, like, originally my goal in organizing these Thursday night meetings was to share tips for using learn-biology.com, but it really evolved into an incredible professional learning community. And I'm a much better teacher for doing it. So I'll be doing it next year. And I hope that folks who came to this meeting are interested in joining us. I also want to thank my programming partner, Dan, and my wife, Nancy, who acted as co-hosts tonight. So I want to just say thank you to everybody. You should feel free to go and sign off. That's true of our panelists too. I'll hang around here if anybody has any questions about learn-biology.com or the Biomania app. Good luck working with your students and getting them ready for this year's AP Bio exam. Thank you all very, very much.